Hello friends, it's great to be with you again. I hope you're doing well. This is Granny's GodPod number 33, How to Live in Canaan. We in the Western world are now living in a post-Christian age, which means we can better understand the problems the Israelites faced when they reached the Promised Land. Before they set off for Canaan, the Israelites had been living among the Egyptians for over 400 years. The Egyptians worshipped many gods, including their pharaoh, who it was believed was the male offspring of their sun god Ra revealed in the flesh. We know the 10 plagues were sent to ensure that Pharaoh agreed to let God's chosen people go free. But as well, each plague was intended to show the one true God of Israel was more powerful than any of the gods of Egypt. For example, the first plague affected the river Nile and Hapi, H-A-P-I, the Egyptian god of the Nile. The second plague of frogs was against Heket, H-E-K-E-T, the Egyptian goddess who was portrayed with the head of a frog. The plagues continued, and even Ra, the sun god, could not prevent the 9th plague, the 3 days of absolute darkness. The highest power in Egypt was the Pharaoh, who was worshipped as the greatest Egyptian god of all. But the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn, reached even Pharaoh's household and demonstrated the ultimate power of the one true God. 3 months after leaving Egypt, God gave Moses the 10 commandments. The Canaanites worshipped several gods, so the Israelites needed instructions on how to behave and how to worship when they reached the promised land of Canaan. The commandments told them what was right and what was wrong, what pleased God and what did not please God. The Israelites were told not to make idols for worship, to keep them apart and anti-Canaanite in manner, to keep them focused on their one true God. We now face similar difficulties to the Israelites, living as followers of Jesus in present-day unbelieving Canaan, needing to be faithful to God when all those around us are not. The world is becoming more and more Canaanite, that is, becoming more and more hostile to the Christian gospel, and making it more and more difficult to reconcile our Sunday worship with our daily worldly interactions. The Israelites were instructed to teach the next generation. Their challenge was to bring up their children as children of Israel, without them becoming influenced by the Canaanites around them. Not an easy task. I was lucky to be brought up at a time when the predominant worldview was a Christian worldview that shaped all of society. My generation lived through a time when most people's values were Christian, even if they themselves were not followers of Jesus. Christianity was inherent but invisible. As a teenager, I was lucky enough to be in the church choir, but there was no Bible study, mentoring or home groups on offer, and my experience was that Christianity seemed to be left to a process of osmosis. Naturally, this process did not keep the succeeding generations from becoming more and more influenced by Canaanite ways. And when non-believers openly challenged our faith, we realised we had not been equipped to answer their questions. I have learned the hard way how much we need the support of study groups, mentoring, and even Granny's GodPods. In this fast-changing culture, Christian principles are being undermined by a non-Christian society that increasingly demands the church falls into line with that society. The modern society is a ruling society promoting the cult of the self. Dr. Eitan Bar, a Jewish Israeli leading the One for Israel ministry, says that the promotion of self over others is what sin is, as we see throughout the Bible. This post-Christian, even pagan world includes a generation who may never have heard of Christian morals. It is a generation where self is the most important thing, and there is no obvious moral consensus because society is no longer God-fearing, not regulated by any idea of theistic authority. A report on GB News recently said Christianity has become the punch bag of a confused society. Jesus said, "Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved." We need to teach children about God, because without that knowledge they will become Canaanite. The Shema, which is part of the Jewish confession of faith, quotes from Deuteronomy 6, verse 4 to 7. "These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up." This instruction was good for the Israelites, and it may be good for us today if we are not too late. It's not just our children, though. The longer we live in Canaan, the more we need to ground our churches in sermons, preaching and studies. If we are to be the salt and the light, both in our communities and in the wider society, we can expect to be tested. We need to be taught how to answer the Bart Ehrmans of this world. We don't need to have an answer for everything, but we can start the conversation. Years ago, I talked to a young church warden about how the church could reach out to those living in the village. It shocked me that she dismissed the idea with the comment, "They know where we are." But it might be a daunting prospect to approach an ancient building with a heavy door, impossible to open without everyone hearing, or difficult to overcome the bewildering way around the service booklet, or uncomfortable not knowing any of the hymns or any of the people. How do we reach out to the unbelieving? We cannot avoid living in Canaan, but we can keep our godly values, our salt and light, and, like John, be voices in the wilderness. This leads me on to something I've been wanting to do for a while, and that is to introduce a Grannie's Youth GodPod. It will be aimed mainly at teenagers, but will also be useful for parents and adults who have contact with teenagers one way or another. This will be Grannie's Youth GodPod 33B, and it deals with questions how to fill our happiness bucket. Please do have a listen and then pass on this GodPod to any young people you know. Thanks then, see you next time.